The Russian T-80 is one of the most recognizable tanks used by Russian forces during the war in Ukraine, and we have witnessed multiple occasions where these tanks have been turned into ashes and smoking debris. Originally developed during the Soviet era, the T-80 was designed as a fast and heavily armed main battle tank, capable of conducting rapid offensive operations across large battlefields. Several versions of the tank exist, including the T-80B, T-80BV, T-80U, and the more modern T-80BVM variant, currently used by Russian forces, which has shown to be no challenge for Ukrainian drone operators. The tank is equipped with a 125mm smoothbore gun and can carry more than 40 rounds of ammunition, depending on the mission configuration. Unlike many older Soviet tanks, the T-80 uses a gas turbine engine, allowing it to accelerate quickly and reach high speeds on the battlefield. Russian forces use the tank for assault operations, infantry support, armored breakthroughs, and defensive missions across the front line. Ukraine also operates T-80 tanks inherited from the Soviet Union and captured from Russian forces during the war. However, despite multiple modernization upgrades, the war in Ukraine has shown that the Russian T-80 remains highly vulnerable on the modern battlefield. Even heavily armored vehicles struggle to survive repeated drone attacks. FPV drones are significantly cheaper than the tanks they destroy, making them one of the most effective weapons against Russian armored vehicles. Once detected by reconnaissance drones, Russian tanks often become immediate targets for coordinated strikes. Damaged or immobilized tanks are usually attacked multiple times until they are completely destroyed. Russian crews have attempted to improve survivability by adding improvised metal cages and extra armor structures on top of the tanks. A major weakness of the T-80 is the way its ammunition is stored inside the tank. When the armor is penetrated, the ammunition can detonate, often causing catastrophic explosions that completely destroy the vehicle. This vulnerability has become increasingly visible during the war. Large numbers of Russian T-80 tanks have been destroyed by FPV kamikaze drones, anti-tank guided missiles, artillery strikes, mines, and grenade drops from commercial drones. Ukrainian drone operators frequently target weak points, such as the engine compartment, tracks, turret ring, optics, and open hatches. These modifications, often called turtle armor or cope cages, are designed to reduce the effectiveness of incoming drone strikes. Camouflage nets and additional protective structures are also used to hide vehicles from aerial reconnaissance. However, these modifications do not guarantee protection. Modern reconnaissance drones equipped with thermal imaging systems can still detect armored vehicles, even in poor visibility conditions. Another major threat to the T-80 comes from modern anti-tank missile systems. One of the first Western weapons delivered to Ukraine was the Javelin anti-tank missile system, which quickly proved highly effective against Russian T-80 tanks. Unlike older anti-tank weapons, the Javelin attacks from above, targeting the tank's weaker upper armor. Even T-80s equipped with explosive reactive armor remain vulnerable to these top attack strikes. Instead of conducting large armored assaults, tanks are increasingly used as mobile artillery platforms, firing from longer distances to avoid drones and anti-tank weapons. Despite these tactical changes, Russian forces continue losing tanks in large numbers. Destroyed T-80 tanks can be seen abandoned across roads, fields, trench lines, and forest belts. Some are destroyed during combat, while others are later targeted by drone operators after being abandoned by their crews. Commercial drones are also used to drop explosives directly into open hatches, allowing operators to destroy immobilized vehicles with low-cost munitions. This allows Ukrainian forces to destroy multi-million-dollar tanks using systems that cost only a fraction of the vehicle itself. The war has shown that speed and heavy armor alone are no longer enough to guarantee battlefield survival. modern drone warfare, precision-guided weapons, aerial reconnaissance, and constant surveillance have significantly reduced the effectiveness of traditional armored assaults. Compared to newer Russian T-90 tanks, the T-80 lacks some of the survivability improvements found in more advanced armored vehicles. Although both tanks remain vulnerable to drones and anti-tank weapons, the T-90 features upgraded protection systems, improved optics, and more advanced defensive technology. However, even these upgrades have not been enough to fully protect Russian tanks from kamikaze drones and precision-guided strikes. As the war continues, Russian armored units are increasingly forced to operate under constant aerial surveillance, where drones can identify and track vehicles within minutes. Once detected, tanks often become immediate targets for coordinated attacks from Ukrainian drone operators. In many cases, FPV drones strike weak points of the vehicle before the crew even has time to react. Damaged tanks are frequently abandoned by their crews and later destroyed by additional drone strikes or artillery fire. Battlefield footage released throughout the war has repeatedly shown how quickly armored vehicles can be eliminated once their position is exposed. This constant threat from drones and anti-tank weapons is one of the main reasons why the battlefield role of tanks has changed significantly during the war. Instead of conducting large armored assaults, tanks are increasingly used as mobile artillery platforms, firing from longer distances in an attempt to reduce exposure to reconnaissance drones and precision strikes. Despite these tactical changes, Russian forces continue losing tanks in large numbers. Destroyed T-80 tanks can be seen abandoned across roads, fields, trench lines, and forest belts, while others are later targeted again after being abandoned by their crews. Russia has reportedly lost large numbers of T-80 tanks since the beginning of the war, with independent battlefield tracking groups regularly documenting destroyed, damaged, and abandoned vehicles across the front line. In recent months, multiple reports have pointed to increasing armored losses during large-scale assault operations, especially involving Russian tanks. At the same time, the Russian war economy is facing increasing pressure to replace these losses, as Soviet-era tank storage reserves continue to shrink. The coming months will likely reveal whether Russia can sustain these losses if Ukraine is able to maintain strong defensive lines and continue targeting armored assaults with drones and anti-tank weapons. All in all, despite decades of modernization,